So I went into this, my students have been for a long time in doing kind of cookbook labs with modifications. And so that they're working with larger data sets, you know, sharing data across a class. They do an experiment and half of them do it at one temperature, half of them do it at another, so they can add on and how does temperature affect percent yield, crystallization, whatever. So this was kind of a nice expansion beyond that. I wanted students to get experience working with larger data sets. I'm working with more real data that I knew would not be as clean, and so not give them clear answers necessarily. I wanted them doing some background research on an applied topic, because my perspective in general chemistry is that it's hard to apply some of that stuff as we're going through materials. It's something that I've not been good about doing. I wanted them to work with other people in a different way than just, hey, we're lab partners. Because when they're lab partners, it's just one other person and they get exactly the same data. I wanted them to kind of have to struggle through hey, this other group did a similar thing and I got to bring these together, but we didn't do it the same way. And then working on their presentation skills. So those are kind of some of the quick main goals that we had. So for our project, initially even getting this set up was really difficult. Liz and Sophie and I, all from Kirkwood, initially were trying to find if there was a way we could do a joint project that we would all do some aspect on. We all were seeking out people. I think we met in person with, I don't know, I met in person with, I think, at least 3 or 4 different researchers. And there was, and then there was lots of conversation with others. And there were a lot of problems, and people had lots of data, but didn't really want student workers. There were training issues on getting our students, you know, we can't have you collect our data because you're not trained, and the training takes time and it's not available, and all of that. So I finally got something worked out with somebody from Iowa Public Works. They were willing to share some of their data from before, but that was like a month into fall term already. And so it was very clear that it was going to be just a data thing, not a go out, and they're not collecting the data, they're just analyzing. So we got data from basically 2 streams that go through town. And they sampled them for a number of different things at different sites. So I started out with the first half was students would get, hey, this is your data site. Here's a description of where it is. They weren't told exactly where it is because the people did not want my students to know what that site was, to prevent somebody thinking they figured something out and spreading word around town about something that was happening at this particular site. So they just got kind of a generic description of it. They had to do background research on the water quality that's related to that test item, nitrates, phosphates, dissolved oxygen, clarity, those kinds of things. They then had to look kind of for patterns across a season. And our data went somewhere from May to August-ish, depending on how long the collection should be. And then also wanted them to look across years. And so their evaluation tool was that they turned in a short research paper that had the background information, it had the graphs they made, and it had their kind of first look at what's going on this one spot on this stream. Then we brought them in and grouped them so that everybody who was looking at nitrates along the stream got together. And so we had 5 or 6 different sites. So they had to share the background information they'd learned to kind of fill in the blanks that they'd had. They had to look not just now at the patterns that they got, but explain their data to the other people, and then look at that. Okay, well, so did we see these same kind of patterns in nitrate levels throughout the stream, or did it only hit in certain spots? Try to figure out if they had variation along the spots, what might have been caused it. You know, did it matter if you were running through a residential area versus you were the one that was near where the industrial area was and the car dealerships and that kind of stuff? And then they had a group project presentation that they did. So that was just kind of the basics. So this is just kind of a sample of, this is the data they got for one site. And like I said, each person, and then each group was just looking at one testable. So nitrates, say. These are just the notes that happened to be attached. So sometimes there's really good detailed notes, and sometimes there's really nothing because it's just whatever the collector happened to notice that day. This data set isn't too bad. It goes almost all the way to August, but we have a lot that these are small creeks, so they dry up for periods of the year. And so they might have a few data points in May, and then have a big block of time where they had nothing. And then if we got a rainy season, they maybe got a little bit more. So pretty simplistic data. But the students had to figure out a lot to figure out what readings are normal, what do we expect, are we really seeing changes? And then brought in conversations about, boy, our nitrates are always 2 or 0. Does that mean anything? Were their tests sensitive enough to tell any difference? So there was a lot of room for students who were interested to really delve into things deeply, and for those students who were less interested to at least get some basic skills down. So again, challenges, finding a partner to work with was really, really difficult. Many of the places that said, oh, well, we've got data, but then when you asked to get the data, they weren't willing to share it or not share it in a easy to work with format. The couple people who even might have considered us collecting data, the water quality training projects just aren't really up and running and weren't training, and to try to get our students to get trained, they weren't willing to send someone out, and so that was difficult. And then just in general, a lot of people were kind of like, well, you guys can't help us do anything. We couldn't trust what you guys got, or we don't need it, or anything like that. So since we got started late, we spent all summer trying to work it out, but didn't. We knew that in the fall it was going to be field work only. And then in the spring, no one's collecting that data and the streams are frozen. So it still turned out to be a non-field work project. And then a big problem for me was student attrition or non-compliance, because if you've got, we made it work, but it added stress to the students when they came in and maybe they had, here's our group of people that's supposed to be in our group, and we've already lost the person who covered site C. And so that was handled by, I did a quick analysis and gave them so that, okay, you've got something so you don't lose that piece of the pattern. But then also and now we've gotten to the project and we're here for our presentation, and somebody never sent their work in or never showed up. And so kind of working through students with just the whole group project kind of thing was a challenge. And for me, as someone who never, ever wanted to do group projects because of that, I could at least be sympathetic. And at the end, I think they were all fine with how it happened. The whole, you're not going to be penalized if somebody else in your group drops the ball and doesn't do something. That does add stress to the project. At the end of this, I wasn't sure. I did it 2 semesters. I wasn't sure how much more I was going to do it, because I just was like, didn't know that I felt like the students got a whole lot out of it necessarily, but I modified the SURE survey to shorten it up a little bit. And these are just a list of some of the topics where my students reported moderate, very large, or large or very large grains. So these are all where more than half, and normally it was more like 80% were in that large to very large gains. So the students seem to get quite a bit more out of this than I thought that they did. Some of the ones I liked in particular, just the idea of they understand how scientists really do things and how they work on real problems, that it's not clean and easy, and it's messy and it takes time and you only get partial answers. And now they have a better understanding of why you do things multiple times, sometimes because you go back and you look at it a little bit differently. The whole tolerance for different obstacles that they faced. Working with larger data sets, they actually were pretty comfortable with that after having done it. Science writing and an effective oral presentation. Writing research papers is a little bit different than writing your lab reports. And before this, so it kind of expanded the kinds of writing I asked for from my students. I did not try to do anything at all this past year. Like I said, I got 2 trials, and I made some modifications between between fall of 2019 and spring of 2020. And as Liz said, my numbers were high enough that we were still not trying to make sure we had a decent set of labs and ways to work with things. I couldn't really put people in 2 rooms the way Liz could, because I can't leave them alone in my chemistry lab. I can't walk out of one room to go into another room if there's any kind of acids or anything dangerous there, and we don't have a second chemistry lab anyway. So I was already dealing with a lot of back and forth and students having to work through new labs that I didn't want to try to add this, where they had a lot of face-to-face kind of questions in an environment where they wouldn't be in a class with the same people. So that's it. That's my basics. Any questions?
Great information. Do you think you'll try it again?
I'm hopeful. I'll have to see, because the person that I worked with and was willing to give me the data also retired. And so there might, I don't know if that project is still going on, if they're still collecting. I, again, didn't try to chase anybody down during COVID as they were at a new position. That's one of my things for this summer. Like I said, I think I changed my mind after seeing how many students reported that they thought it was useful and that they got something out of it. So I think I'll try to do something like it. I don't know if I'm going to try to include a field work component. I think that'll be just, if I happen to run into somebody who has something we can do, we will, but the challenges there were really high for me. Or if someone gets me an idea for a totally different project, I'd be willing to consider it.
Yeah, I think the fieldwork component is always challenging unless you have some resource right next to the school that you could even walk out to or something. Are there any streams or anything on your campus? I'm assuming not.
No, nothing I think that's close enough that we could walk to make it work for me.
And on a side, I think a lot of you who are in Iowa, especially in the environmental field, probably remember the old iWater program, which was citizen science. And that was the challenge, the biggest criticism. And one of the reasons the DNR cited for ending the program was that the data was not reliable enough coming from volunteers, which I tend to disagree with, but for better or for worse, that's where it ended up. So.
Yeah, and that's what kind of came up a lot early on, was we were thinking maybe we can tap into some of that testing or some kind of or similar training, and it just wasn't available because the project was.
Yeah. Any other questions or comments for Lynn? Jim.
One thing that we've done to get around the field work problem, but to have something similar to what you've done, is the students have analyzed drinking waters. And so they've brought waters from different towns or cities, or bought things in stores or whatever, so that their sample collection is easier, and then done similar, somewhat different analyses, because the ion, what they're looking for is different, but in a similar to what you did, that kind of jigsaw. So a group would specialize in nitrate or calcium, sodium, etc., and then a jigsaw. So then they would come together and put together an ion count for a particular water. And I'd be happy to send that to you if it's something you think you'd be interested in trying.
I would love to see that. That reminds me that that's one of the avenues that we were looking at exploring. We found some people who were testing like water fountains in schools. We thought that might be be a project that we can do. And then this one just turned out to be an easier data and faster data collection. But that water quality and drinking water quality would be a really good project. So I'd love to see it.